You guys don't want to miss this one. So it's interesting. Phil got up here and he talked about the date at which things changed. And it's funny, I wasn't even anticipating him talking about that. And literally, I sat there and I just did the math for myself a few minutes ago too. And it was roughly 800 days ago that all of our lives changed. And I know it might sound a little corny to you guys, but I think it was at the same BUILD conference that we went to. And, fantastic event, speakers that were on stage, great having this. And it was interesting, at some point along the way, somebody said, you need to get down to the steakhouse. You need to get down there. They're going to have a couple people talk. I had no idea what was going on. And it was really, really interesting how we got down there, we started listening, and a couple people from corporate got up and they were talking about a few initiatives and things. And then this guy got up. And it was so funny, this guy. And then he gets up there and he starts talking and he says, okay, I've been here for a few weeks and I've renegotiated this contract and the company's going to get more out of this engagement. I've renegotiated this. It's going to save us hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever it was. I've renegotiated this. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't think the ink on his offer letter is even dry yet. And he's already jumped in with 2 feet and he's already changed this, and everything's for the better for all of us. So I welcome you. I thank you. I think it's fantastic and you flew in from Miami, right? Awesome. So we have about 20 minutes, and what I really wanted to focus on with you are maybe some of the things that people want to hear from the smartest guy in the room. They want to hear from the guy, and again, that's the thing that I was so impressed with when I saw you at the Dallas Build 800 days ago. And it was, you sat there and you talked about data, and you talked about this, and I literally, you, and I don't know, maybe in a different circle, but I've kind of, at this point, kind of summarized you as speak softly and carry big data. So, I think everybody in this room would probably love to know right now, what is your outlook? As the CEO of EXP, what is your outlook for the next 12 months?
That's a good question. So I became CEO on April 5th, and it was interesting because Glenn and I had the conversation for a long time of when I was ready, and I kept telling him I really liked being the fun uncle versus dad, because my entire life I'd been the founder and CEO, so I really was enjoying not being the CEO. And March 15th is when our collective world changed, right? That was the Friday we found out that the NAR had settled. That weekend, I spent the weekend on the phone with Glenn and our attorneys. And that's when Glenn made the decision, which I give him mad respect for, where he said, talk to our agents. I don't care the risk. It's what you guys need to do. And so I woke up and went live on YouTube on Monday the 18th. And unbeknownst to me, 53,000 people showed up. Which I did not have YouTube open because I would have probably freaked out a little bit. And the next day, Jack Miller from T360 called me and said, I think you garnered the single largest audience in organized history ever. And what that told me is not that I'm smart or special. I appreciate the compliment. It's just that collectively our industry was just starving for information. Right? That weekend, I got texts and workplace chats and direct messages from a lot of folks who literally said, I am not sure how I'm going to be able to feed my family. Right? I was part-time, I've transitioned to full-time, I'm the primary breadwinner. I just need to understand. So we dived in as quickly as possible to give you guys as much information as possible. And what I always say to people is life is 10% what happens and 90% how you react to it. Right? This is a moment where we have to separate our emotions. And I've been really public about it. I think these plaintiffs' attorneys are a bunch of ambulance chasers who don't give a goddamn about our industry. Yes, I said what I said. They do not care about the public. They do not care about consumers, because if they did, this settlement would have made more sense to all of us. But emotions aside, the question I always ask myself, are these the new rules of engagement? Mm-hmm. Is there a way around them? If they're not, then you always have a choice. Do you still want to compete in the marketplace and serve families in buying the most expensive decision they make? Or do you not want to serve families and go do something else? And if the answer is you want to serve families, which I would hope you continue to do because it's a noble profession that's important, then you just have to adapt. And in my career, I've seen this happen a couple times. The last one was really the financial crisis, where the government intervened and created Dodd-Frank and CFPB, and they moved the cheese for the mortgage industry. We didn't get nearly as hit, but folks that own mortgage companies, if they didn't adjust fast enough, if they didn't adjust to the new rules and the new manufacturing costs that came with loans, they went out of business. And many companies went out of business in 08, 09, not just because there was less transactions, because they couldn't adjust to the rule changes. So we jumped in as fast as possible. I think 2 weeks later, Glenn called me. He's like, "You are the CEO. There's no more negotiating." And then we've now become the leader in the industry. We've created our own forums. The Consumer Federation of America came out and said we are the gold standard. And by the way, those people don't like real estate agents, so that's an extra compliment coming from them. A couple of weeks ago, I saw Inman wrote up that one of the attorneys suing us gave us a compliment. They were saying most big brokerages aren't getting it figured out with the exception of EXP that's consumer friendly. So, thank you. So, super long-winded preamble, but to tell you guys that we're going to be in a messy middle for a while. And I've been accused of having a crystal ball before, and I fundamentally don't think I do, but I can normally just see enough 30, 60 days just by looking at data. And there's going to be a lot of confusion. So I think in the last 30 days, I've probably done 20 media interviews. I was actually upstairs talking to CNN before I came down about rate cuts. And it's interesting to me, especially now that I'm talking to so much media, it's like, what do you think this does? What do you think that does? And I keep telling them, it doesn't matter. Human condition drives residential real estate. And residential real estate is completely different than office space and warehouses and multifamily. Because what drives every single move is something that happened to a human, right? We fall in love, we need more space, we need less space, you make little people, they move out, death, divorce,
So
and a couple
you're
of
saying it's a little more
along the way.
primal.
It's completely primal. So like upstairs, I was talking to Amanda from CNN, and she said, "What do you think the rate cuts are going to do to buyers?" And I said, it won't fundamentally change anything. I think, this is my humble opinion, that life event happens, right? We're in a studio, and we need a 2-bedroom because my wife's pregnant, and our lease is about to expire in 90 days. We then go out into the market and decide whether we rent or buy. And that's when affordability and interest rates make a difference. Supply, demand, and affordability. So if I'm spending X, do I continue to rent and spend X, or can I afford to buy? And so I think the human condition still triggers the move, and then you make the decision to either buy or rent. And so this year, we're going to sell about 3.9 million homes with resale and about 700,000 homes with new construction.
Nice.
Which is just as bad as last year. And it's actually important that you guys hear that. Do you guys realize that's the worst year in transactions in 30 years? That's actually less homes sold than in 2008. And so, hear me say, we're in a recession of transactions in our industry. Right? The word recession has a whole lot of different meanings to economists, but in the world we live in and how we feed our families, we're in a recession. And so that's important for me to say out loud because sometimes you guys are probably beating yourself up saying, I'm not doing as good as I was last year. Or it's really, really hard out there. It's really competitive out there. And I get to talk and hear at scale, and there's a lot of fatigue and just tiredness, right? So first of all, I commend you and keep your head up, because right now, winning is surviving. And sometimes you just need to internalize that. But what I promise you, because I've been through a couple of these, is in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, once we get to a normalized historic amount of homes, which is probably 5.5 to 6 million homes, you will have competed and gotten market share, and all of a sudden, it'll feel good.
So are you saying, in a sense, if people lean in right now, they'll slingshot out the other side?
100%. So I'll explain it to you. In 2022, we sold more homes than 2023 as a company. But we went from controlling 3.8% of every house sold in America to 4.2. So even though we sold less homes, we took a bigger slice of pie, right? We play a finite game in real estate. It is not an exponential game. Historically, in this country, we sell between 4 to 7 million homes, and it tends to depend on interest rates and available inventory. And we have a shortage of inventory that is very real. It was part of the debate yesterday, right? We're short somewhere between 10 million homes. Some economists say 5, some say 15. I split it down the middle, and that's a systemic lack of homes built since the financial crisis. So that is not going away. We will be short homes for the next 10 years. So demand will continue, and the amount of homes sold is almost a direct math problem to interest rates. So I think 2025 will be a little bit better than last year from a transaction standpoint, but I can probably predict it will be messy, right? You'll have confusion from agents, and North Carolina, you've been one of my special states with this shift. Your 220 form and all kinds of stuff I know about your state now, versus like it's market by market. But I implore you to lead with grace, right? The last time I saw this much shift was during the financial crisis. And I remember having a first-time home buyer already packed in their home, ready to close on Friday, and Monday morning, because the settlement got pushed, we found out that, IndyMac no longer existed. And the loan was no longer available, and we had to extend for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks versus try to take their deposit and strong arm and bully them through the situation. So as you navigate the confusion and agents disagree with how we're doing things or how we're suggesting you should do things, I implore you to have a lot of patience and grace, because what I can tell you I'm seeing across the country is at the new agent orientation and onboarding, people are joining us every day because we're leading. Because we have the consumer interest in mind. And my humble opinion is the next 24 months will probably be the biggest growth opportunities we've had since COVID. I am talking to 100-person brokerages, 500-person brokerages, 3,000-person brokerages who said, I'm done. I don't want the liability anymore. I want to plug into a bigger platform. I want to plug into a scaled platform, right? And the bigger they are, the more they tell me, I've talked to the bootleg imitation versions of you, and what we're looking for is operational excellence. We're looking for scalability. Sustainability equals legacy. One of the things that is very different about companies with a rev share model that I try to explain to folks is that when you are an entrepreneur and you guys build a real estate business, a mortgage business, a title business, a staging business, a coaching business, that rises and falls with your ability to lead and operate. When you decide to build a rev share business, you're actually entrusting us with a whole lot of trust that in 5, 7, and 10 years, the legacy and the effort you've put in will continue to pay you the promise we made to you. And so when folks talk about ground floor opportunity, I remind them that that's a 99% failure rate in this country with entrepreneurship. And unlike other businesses where it completely rises and falls with you, this one you're entrusting somebody else with that.
So, pretty powerful, right? So, and I'm not sure through the introduction if everybody heard or not, but you used to sell real estate.
I am still a licensed broker. And I think I'm the only CEO of a public company who actually sold homes, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But yes, I was licensed I practiced for 16 years. In those 16 years, I sold close to 4,000 homes. In 2010, I was the #1 Keller Williams agent on the planet. And I was 1, 2, or 3 for about 5 years in a row.
So maybe that creates a little bit of confidence and believability in you, maybe? Like, you kind of know what you're doing?
I walked a mile in your shoes.
So here's the question. If you were in everyone's shoes here in the next 6 to 24 months, what would you be doing?
I would obsess with skills. This is now a professional's, skill-based, confident-based business. Every one of you is a listing agent from here on out. I promise you in 12 months when we look back and we're onboarding new agents and they're learning how to do real estate, they'll actually think we were crazy for putting buyers in our cars without signed agreements. And I know North Carolina is different, but the rest of the states weren't. And so why most agents don't become listing agents is confidence. Statistically, it's only 30 hours to sell a listing, and it's about 80 to 100 hours to do a buyer transaction. So logically, you should want to jump over to that's what I did. I'm very data-driven, as you said. He was nice. I'm just a data nerd. But when you look at the confidence it used to take, you would be in a competitive situation, typically against other folks with potentially different business models. You had to come with a presentation that was tight, and you would dictate the services you were willing to render for the fee you're willing to collect, with a start and an end date. And the only reason you did that is because MLS is required, right? Imagine showing up to a listing appointment going, hey, I'm going to list this house, and they're going to say, what are you going to charge me? We'll see when the offer gets here. That's what we've been doing with buyer agency, right? Whatever was offered is what you received. And how long is this going to go for? Until you ghost me or I ghost you. Right? Isn't that what we did with buyers sometimes? Now assume every presentation is competitive. And what I would implore you to do is to learn your numbers. Because what I know at scale is the best listing agents I'm friends with know their days on market, their list to sales ratio, do you sell above list? Can you articulate your value proposition? None of us are well versed in that as a buyer's agent because it was never required. So I would invite you to go back 24 months of transactions and find out how many times did you win in a multiple offer situation? What is the average concession that you were able to get for a buyer? Right? Imagine you say to a buyer, hey, the last 24 people I put into homes, on average I got them 3% concessions and a 5% discount off list. Oh, by the way, my fee is X. Right? You're leading with statistical value. I would also invite you to tell those buyers who had a positive experience with you, which by the way is about 79% of them, what about the services I rendered did you love? And I want you to include those words in your buyer presentation. And then I want you to go tell those buyers to write Google reviews using your buyer agency gifts and talents, right? Because our digital footprint is everything. If a consumer, by the way, do you guys know that your first time meeting a customer is about your second interview? Right? They've already Googled you to find out what people think about you.
Exactly.
And if they find 6 or 7 or 8 reviews where, hey, we won on a multiple contract situation. No, by the way, we did not pay above list because my agent negotiated a rent back with the seller that didn't cost me anything and it was amazing. Right? You take for granted what you do as a professional. Every one of you need to have a buyer presentation that articulates the 105 things that NAR says we do per transaction. Right? You need to be able to articulate all this. So if there is a discussion about compensation, you can actually say, well, which of these services don't you want me to do? Right? You need to be able to say, this is what I deal with. There was a survey that said that the average buyer in America thought an agent spent about 15 hours with them on a transaction. And NAR stat says 80 to 100 hours. So we have a big disconnect. So it's all about bridging those gaps and being able to articulate that.
And to dovetail what you're saying, on Craig and Shelley's team, LePage Johnson Group, we went through a couple years ago and we did something for a listing presentation. And we did this to show value, what Leo is talking about. And we created a document that goes with a listing presentation for the agent to go over everything. And it shows the 138 steps that their team goes through every time they list a property. So those customers, those clients that feel like you just stick a sign in the ground and think, you're going to sit back and collect a check at some point, they don't realize at some point, like you've already done 30 things before you've ever stepped foot in their house for a listing presentation. We've already pulled this, pulled that, gone through this, done CMAs and so forth. We've done all these things that are value building propositions before we ever step foot in your house. And I think to your point, if you dovetail what I'm going to do with you with data, there will be no discussion about compensation.
So I got one more script for you guys that I want you to write. When you're in front of the buyers and you're doing your buyer presentation, and once they sign, I want you to say, I'm super excited, congratulations on starting the home journey, and I'm glad you're qualified. By the way, the house will ultimately buy. There's a 90+% chance you're going to find it online, or a friend or family is going to send it to you. Because, by the way, now that you're in the buying market, everyone's an expert. Just so you know, the vast majority of the value I'll bring to this transaction starts when we identify the house and I write the contract and help you navigate the negotiations and get you through the inspections and get you closed. So identifying the property and unlocking the door is about this much of what I do for you. Is that fair?
Hit it between the eyes. So, how about we all say thank you to Leo? I appreciate your time.